47.
come and do an introduction.
Oh, you are.
And
So you're recording.
And the other
Yes.
one has got a daughter that I have found, so it's interesting.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming. Might need to turn some sound out. Thank you for coming to our evening. Now, oops, no, up one before I get to that. Important things. My name is Barbara, as most of you know, Barbara Ray, and I am one of the library staff here, although, as I just said, I don't work in the library very often. And I'm Local Studies Engagement Officer for the City of Bunbury. And I have loved history all my life. My granddad got me, we were just talking about granddads telling war stories, and my granddad got me into history and family history in particular through his stories. And so that's I bring my passion to that. And I really love to collect stories, people's stories to put in our archives in Bunbury. And our guest today, Jeffrey Pearce, is a master at this and a real inspiration to the rest of us, Jeff, if I can say that. So let me just go through the normal housekeeping. This is all completely upside down, of course. The toilets are over in that direction. Tea and coffee's here behind me, and the emergency exit is the way that you came in. Hopefully we don't have any problems. We are recording the talk this evening. If it works, it might be available on the internet in future times, hopefully without this bit of introduction. We'll see what Dean does with that. Just to let you know, those of you who haven't been before, these Discover Your Family History evenings kind of fall into three brackets. First is the technical talks, the technical bits about building your family history and doing your family tree and how to do it. And sometimes we do talks, sometimes we do a bit of a workshop. We've got a workshop coming up next month, but I'll tell you about that at the end. How to use history collections is something else that we look at, all the different history collections that the groups want to look at. I look into them and come back and say, okay, this is what you can get out of it, this is how much it costs, this is how you get to the free stuff. And then we also invite guest speakers to share their knowledge, mostly about local history, and really encourage people to know where to look and to share that family history as well. Ooh, wrong way. So tonight I would like to welcome Jeff Pearce, who's our local historian and author, to tell us about his websites. He's a prolific website writer and also an author. And so Jeff's going to take us through his websites and tell us about his current project and one he's just finished. So I will step aside and hand over to Jeff. And hopefully that moves seamlessly through. Over to you, Jeff.
Can you give a little... I'll move on to the next one.
So just left click. Oh, sorry. Should go.
Next. Sticking on that one.
Oh, hang on. Let's take us back to the beginning.
Like when we're all getting older, everything is a bit slower. Here we go.
We're a bit slow.
Right, so thanks for coming, and I'm sure you'll find it interesting. Some of the stuff I mentioned tonight you'll not have known before. I'm a real keen student of the First World War, but purely on the basis of the men and women who were there not so much interested in how many were in battles and how they were won and structured. But just on the Great War, you may already know, there was 20 million deaths. And that's why they called it the war to end all wars, or so they thought at the time. Why would you want to enter into this? We just lost 20 million people. Of those, 10 million were service personnel and the other 10 million were private citizens, which is really horrible to think. So, because we decided there'd never be another war, Mr. Hitler obviously wasn't listening at the time. So in the Second World War, it's estimated between 70 and 85 million people lost their lives. The reason there's such a big gap, many were just disappeared. And of course, because sometimes it was the whole families, you know, the exterminations and one thing and another, there was a lack of thorough recording of exactly who left us. So that's a pretty frightening detail to have with that many losses. So I'll go through the websites I developed one at a time. So Bunbury War Heroes, if you're not familiar with that, basically it's every man and woman who are buried, ashes placed, or they've got a memorial within the grounds of the Bunbury Cemetery and Crematorium. So it's every man and woman who enlisted for war service. And that could be Australia, New Zealand, Britain, there's a Spanish Civil War man there. So we've wanted to acknowledge all of them. And at the time we put this together, it was the only one of its type in Australia, we believe. The RSL has been chasing cemeteries all around Australia, or people who are historians of cemeteries, to get details of every service person that's actually buried or ashes placed within their cemeteries. And there's a lady I bumped into on Saturday who's actually doing that here in WA purely to find service personnel, particularly from the First World War, who are currently still in unmarked graves. And we just did a commemoration at Harvey on Saturday. There was 7 that were previously in totally unmarked graves, now have Commonwealth War graves, etc., and plaques, and so everyone on the planet who walks there will be able to say, wow, really? And one of them was a nurse. So the headings here, alphabetical listing. When you click on that, and if you want to take some notes if you're going to be using this, there'll come a red PDF symbol will come up. You push on that and up comes the spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet's got surname, Christian names, service number, rank, what division or battalion they're in, the date they enlisted, the date they were discharged, the date of their death, how old were they when they died, exactly where are they buried or ashes placed. And there's another column for other information, which I've made notes in there. For instance, I was fascinated, commandos, they were very light on. So where someone was nominated, I put that in the right-hand column. So I've broken them up. So they're in the alphabet, every single one, and there's 678 on there at the moment. So
that we know of.
yeah, there's more coming up. And I call it a living website for the dead, because Carol's been working there, what, 18 years or so? And so every time there's a service where the last post goes off, or the staff say, oh, that guy was a serviceman, Carol brings home the details, I research their history and get all those details and post it on there.
Yeah, but not until they're buried. Because sometimes they take the ashes away, so not until they're actually placed.
Yeah, they've got to be within, and a number of families over the years have contacted me and said, well, why isn't my granddad on there? Well, they were born in Bunbury, worked in Bunbury, enlisted from Bunbury, but their ashes were taken away by family and scattered, or they're buried elsewhere. Karrakatta is a favourite one. So Boer War, any of these 678 who served at the Boer War are under that heading as well. Same with the rest, Gallipoli, Kokoda Trail, Korea, Rats of Tabuk, Vietnam. So any that served in those particular places are also under a separate heading, so you go straight there. Anyone who had medals, honours and awards are under that heading. Prisoners of war, and the women at war, which is an area I'm really delving into really deeply now, because that study and research and publishing has not been done yet, and in 100 years I'm astounded that it hasn't been. There's a few biographies on there as well, and these are the few. Well, we've got these two men, they're on my shirt, so's Mr. Stanley, and those who have heard of or know of Dick Clark, who built furniture for 50 years and he was totally blind. He's probably my ultimate hero. So that's what's on that website. Then I was fascinated by the Bunbury War Memorial, and I thought, oh well, there'll be an historian in town, or the RSL, or local history, someone will have details of all the men on there. But no, they didn't. You may remember Joy and Alf Mort, who used to do a lot of research, lonely graves, all the war memorials in the state, incredible summary of work in their lifetime. So I was lucky when Joy passed, she willed that to me, so we've been able to benefit from that and put it with institutions who really needed that. It saves them hundreds of hours of research if suddenly, well, that's what you're after. So, you know, their work has been sensational. I think I dedicated this website to them. Now here, First World War, that'll have all the soldiers in their alphabetical order and their service history. It's basic service history, because another website has everything on it. Buried overseas. Carol and I have travelled extensively Europe and Turkey, particularly with an interest to any of these guys who are, well, most of them were buried overseas. So we went to their grave sites, took a photo, and I did a bit of a dedication, a movie about them, which is sort of unpublished. And I just love that. The feedback has been, you know, there's a number of these people came out from England or Ireland or Scotland, Wales, any UK, some Norway and Sweden, and they'd never had the opportunity to sort of go to these. And people from Australia just couldn't afford it, you know, when you think they were buried prior to 1920, and there was a depression after that and then the Second World War. So it's really nice for them to be able to click on there, find their granddad's or great-granddad's grave in France or Belgium or Turkey and go, wow, that's where he is. And I tell you what, to stand in front of those graves is so highly emotional when you're not related to them. I guess the extra bit I had that caused me pain was I knew exactly how they died, and I knew where they worked, where they lived, so I could visualise them when I'm there. And I thought, what a tragic waste of life. So we'll move on. Yeah, Bunbury Cemetery Heritage Walk. I worked at the Bunbury Cemetery for 6 or 7 years, and I kept seeing these magnificent headstones, and I thought, gee, there's got to be a lot of history here. So I ended up getting all Bunbury's history books, going through the names, those who were significant in the development of Bunbury, and, you know, tragic accidents, other losses of life, and I thought, I ended up with about 200 odd names, so then I went through the cemetery's register to see, are they buried there? Because a number of them early on were in the Pioneer Cemetery, which is another tragic event. But I ended up with, I think there's about 40 names. And on there's a view map, which I encourage people to print that map out and do a self-guided tour. Because at each of the, yeah, and there's a brochure there that's taken the cemetery board 10 years to produce, but it's there. The beauty of that is when you get to each of the grave sites, there's a dark blue pole. On that pole is a stainless steel or aluminium little rectangular QR code. So you can go there and go click on your phone or your iPad and read. It's only a brief description of each of them, because in all of these I've set up, my idea is to stimulate some enthusiasm to do further research. not give you everything on a platter, because you know, I came into it knowing nothing. So, you know, it's really good if you're connected to any of these people. There's probably 3 or 4 times the research opportunities today than there was when I started 12 years ago. That was really hard yards. And now, you know, if I want to know anything extra, you key the name and you go, wow, that website wasn't there 12 years ago. So people who picked up what I've done in the future, it's like when you go to school, kids who go to school now start with what took us 50 years to learn, so they can only go forward, or you'd hope so, you know, it's a bit of a worry. So that's about all you need to know on that. There's a bit of a history about when the cemetery opened and so on, because I was appointed the official historian for the cemetery board at one stage. I don't know why that's happening.
It's very pretty.
Yeah. Maybe. Okay. The next website is Anzac Heroes. That's the big one. That's most of my last 12 years has been with putting that together. There's, on the real website, there's 8 slideshows, and they're the key locations within the world where our soldiers and nurses were. So I ended up with the Men and Gate, Lone Pine, Gallipoli is. That's just the first one where they were camped near the pyramids. I mean, what a wonderful location, but not a good reason to be there at the time. Now that one, in the last year I've added Anzac Search because I found the nominal roll is in alphabetical order, but what you'd find is if you keyed in Johnson, you'd get a stack of different, like the Johnsons who had a second Christian name Johnson, you get Johansson, you get all sorts of things. Now with Anzac Search, if you've got the soldier's full name, you just put Johnson, Albert Vincent, bang, there he is. And just as I'm really lucky, my son is a website designer and developer, so at the beginning all of these websites came out of my head on the paper, but he had to build it and obviously advance my ideas because, you know, I'm middle 70s, so, and I had no computer trainings, so it's been a real chore of his, and I'm really excited with that Anzac Search. That makes it so much swifter. And with each of the websites, you never have to go more than 3 clicks. Right at the beginning, when I was doing research, I'd get so frustrated with, oh, you've got to click here, and then you go there and you're trying to find the clue and go back, and then it was driving me nuts. So if I go on a website today that's more than 3 clicks, I just opt out. I don't care, I'm not interested. So on here, you'll go in, you'll select a heading and you're straight with the answer. There's no 4th click unless you're looking for someone else or you make a mistake. Now, decorations and awards. So everyone who won a medal, whether it be Military Medal or Victoria Cross, the actual citation for why they were awarded that is on there. Prisoners of War, they have letters to and from, like families and the Red Cross who were in charge of trying to track down the prisoners of war, because families would eventually be directed to Red Cross in London. I haven't heard about my son for 6 months or more, can you try and find him? So they had a record of missing persons that is accessible on the web now. So each of those letters or correspondence, and some of them are really heartwarming, but also there's situations where the camp didn't want them giving out any information, so they quite often just say, I'm well, eating well, or receiving my Red Cross parcels, because those that have studied the war know that a lot of them in the camps were just surviving on those parcels. A lot were made up from here, and that's a separate story, but a German who lived here and was totally ostracised when the First World War broke out, he was a driving force in funding a lot of the